Hello again, everyone. It's time for One-on-One. I'm Martin Falls, and today our guest is going to be Mr. Cohen Guidry. He is the Executive Director of TITA. But we're going to go way back. We're going to find out what makes him tick, and he's also served our country quite well. Tonight on One-on-One, Cohen Guidry. One-on-One is brought to you by the Law Office of Waits and Downer. And welcome back to One-on-One. I'm Martin Falls, and once again, very pleased to have with us Mr. Cohen Guidry. He's the Executive Director of TITA, but he wasn't always the Executive Director of TITA. So, Cohen, good to have you. Good to see you.
Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Let's go way back to the earliest years you can remember. You shouldn't have to go far. You're younger than me. So go back to the earliest years you can remember. Take us back. Paint a picture. Where were you born? What was it like?
I was born in Anchorage, Alaska.
Really?
And my earliest memory would probably be 3 years old, and I learned to snow ski. And I was coincidentally talking to somebody about this the other day, and they were so amazed that I could remember back to 3 years old. Well, I can. So, we lived in Alaska, and my biological father was on the Alaska pipeline. He and my mother were both from the Montana area. They're both cattle ranchers' families. And they moved to Alaska to chase the Alaskan pipeline. And my mom was an accountant. My dad worked on the Alaskan pipeline, and then I've got two older sisters, so we were all up there, and they kind of parted ways, and my mom was raising three kids by herself. And she went to a tax convention in Atlanta, Georgia, and met my adopted father, Doug Guidry, who's from Houma, and he's a CPA. You talk about a long-distance relationship. You know, he's in South Louisiana, and she's in Anchorage, Alaska. And somehow they made it work. And
one's in the heat, and one's in the cold.
Yeah, and it's funny because by this time I'm probably almost 5 years old, and he came up to visit. And I'm struggling, I thought the garbage can that was, the old galvanized garbage cans are only about 2.5, 3 feet tall. I used to have to drag that thing in the snow around the back of the house into the street. And he stands there in the big picture window. Didn't help me, of course, but he says, if you ever move to Louisiana, you'll never have to take the garbage out in the snow. Well, I thought it snowed everywhere, and I learned real quick that he was a
you thought you weren't
you
weren't taking the garbage out at all.
Yeah,
but you took it out.
I'm telling my mom, hey, let's get our stuff packed up and get out of here.
Right. So how did that cold weather affect you growing up? Because Montana, when you go to Montana, Nichols played Montana in a couple of playoff games.
Yeah.
It is cold as could be. Alaska's cold. Did it toughen you up as a kid?
I've been here since I was 5, so, it's a pretty easy transition. We moved, I want to say springtime, so it was a little bit of a transition to get acclimated, but nothing that caused any problems.
I never knew you were born in Alaska, but tell me about your schooling, growing up. Where did you go? Who were some of the influences on you, and what sort of set the stage for you?
We started out kind of like I said, we moved in the springtime, so I think it was kind of mid-semester when we got here. And first school was Maria Immaculata, and Sister Jean was the principal there, and so we had a short time there. My dad had 3 sons. My mom had 2 daughters and me. So had I been a girl, it would have been the Brady Bunch. But so they tried to put us all in one household that was neither theirs nor ours. And kind of neutral ground, kids can be. So we had 6 of us crammed into a house in Mulberry for a short time, and they bought some property in Schriever and started building a house at a
Mulberry. I grew up in Mulberry. What part of Mulberry? Leewald.
Yeah. So
you were close to the Doyles, and
right across the street from Brad Doyle and those guys.
Really?
Yeah. I was just a little kid.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Tracy's lived on Leewald for a while. A lot of people.
the
Levon.
Babins.
Yeah,
And,
right.
Yeah, so we managed to stay there for a little while, and then when we moved out to Schriever in the summer, we all kind of got situated in different schools, and I started at St. Bernadette. And, I laugh because, as you mentioned earlier, so when I'm jumping around a bit, but we talked about the old nuns, and they were such a great I didn't think it was great influence back then.
That was my next question. Was how did you do with the nuns?
The nuns, it's really tough when you're the youngest of 6 and you come after all of them because they remember you.
Yeah.
Oh, I know you. Gidry, I know your brothers and sisters. So it was challenging to say the least.
Why was it challenging? Were you a little mischievous?
Well, I kind of paid penance for some of the sins that they may have committed.
Sure you did.
But I was the only 8-year-old that could hold two full-blown Bibles out like this for long periods of time.
On your knees, while on your knees?
Yeah.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
The nuns, they get a bad rap because they were tough as nails. But weren't they supposed to be to bring us up correctly?
Absolutely. I think the kids today are missing that. A lot of things have changed since you and I were in school, and those nuns, they kept you walking a straight line. And it's funny because years later, I show up to Fort Benning, Georgia, which is the basic infantry training, and you've got drill sergeants screaming and spitting in your face and everything else. You got grown men. I was 17 years old when I showed up at Fort Benning, and I'm looking around and I'm like, this is not that bad. And they've got people that are, I say grown men, they're 21, 23 years old, and they're having to come apart because they can't adapt to somebody in their face screaming at them, ordering them around, and I'm just straight-faced and dealing with it. They're like, how can you be so calm? I said, well, because of a strict mother and nuns at Catholic schools, they prepared me for this day all my life, and I didn't know it. This is not that bad.
So your mom was strict too?
Very strict.
Really?
She was a little lady. She could shoot a look across the room. If you were someplace misbehaving, being too loud, being rambunctious or what have you, she could do and shoot that look across the room, and you almost locked up and went to position of attention. Now, my dad's 3 sons, my older brothers, they hadn't quite figured that out yet, but they soon did, as time went on. But
were you like an Eddie Haskell type? You could walk in the neighbor's house, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Bourgeois, how you doing? And all of a sudden, because I watched you, got to know you a little bit since you became TITA director, you could work a room pretty good.
Well, growing up in the country out in Schriever, we had 33 acres of property, so it wasn't, neighbors weren't like it was in Mulberry. But we any place we went, we were always welcomed because we behaved. We brought our manners with us, and that was the talk you got in the car. You better show up with your manners, and you better represent me correctly and everything else. And that was instilled in us at a young age. And, we didn't have, kids today, they'll walk up and interrupt their adult conversation, and it's almost accepted. Back when we were kids, that was not something. But we would sit down for a family dinner every night. And both of my parents worked. They were both in the accounting field. They were both CPAs later. So, but that was something that was very important to my parents is you were going to sit down, you were going to have a family dinner. We were going to talk about what we did at school. We were going to talk about, everybody had their turn. But it prepared us to speak in front of other people. So at young ages, we could carry on adult conversations and not be a whiny little kid that's asking dumb questions. So we were always accepted at a very young age in an adult atmosphere.
So very regimented.
Very much regimented.
And like you said, your Army background, very regimented. So you've led a regimented life.
Well, I try. I mean, I think everything fits in a box, but, you should have processes of different things, whether it's personal life or structure in business or what have you. And some people they don't always adhere to that.
So let me ask you this, because you walk into a business or you walk into a setting and it's not so regimented. When did you start learning that, okay, they're not really regimented here, I can get over it? Or is it still when you walk in and see a place or you perform a task or you do your duties as executive director, you still feel like you got to be regimented?
I still hold myself to a pretty high, or try to hold myself to a pretty high personal standard. Mm-hmm. I had realized a long time ago I'm not going to change everybody. You know, you can influence people and you can encourage them, and especially younger kids, you know, or younger people. You know, I have 3 sons, and I got them without the instruction manual. I married a lady who had 3 kids, and we liked each other enough to get married and raised the kids, adopted them. And so, you know, I got a 5-year-old.
Full circle.
Yeah, I got a good example.
Yeah.
I had a 5-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And, you know, I started trying to raise kids the way my mom did and my parents did. And I learned real quick that it's not everybody just snaps right into the way that they're supposed to be. But it was challenging, and I think it was a learning. I learned to mellow a bit, and they learned to bring their standard up. And I still, you know, I'm still in their lives today, and they still come back and they say, you know, I didn't know you were preparing me for life. And that's exactly what our parents are supposed to do, is prepare their children for life.
So you sort of learned how to negotiate. Because when you're in the Army, you weren't negotiating with your superiors.
No.
They were telling you what to do.
And all the only thing you can say is, yes, sir. But, you know, today, you know, I still get the last word in every discussion with my wife. It's usually yes, ma'am.
So, but in general, so you've had to morph a little bit.
Yeah.
How's the morphing process? When did you sense, what age were you when you started thinking, yeah, I might be mellowing a little bit?
Probably in my mid-30s.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you realize that you can't conquer the world, and realize that you're not going to get everybody into your strict way of thinking about things. But you got to let some of that stuff go. You can't. I think it will eat you up inside if you let too much of it rule your life.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
You come from a military background, you come from a strict upbringing, but I've watched you around people who are in high authoritative positions. You're very respectful. You can almost see the military come out, very respectful. When I saw you around Gordy Dove, not, hey Gordy, how you doing? Mr. Parish President.
Yeah.
And that struck me. So respect is a big part of your life, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think it should be a big part of everybody's life. But, you know, I think that we have lost the art in this country. You know, instead of, it's a position. It's a position of authority that's held by an individual. And that individual is always going to change. But that position is always going to be there, and it's going to be important. And people have lost the ability to respect the position.
Right.
You know?
And I'm sure now it's Mr. Badgerall.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And that's good to hear that, because I'm sort of old-fashioned when I feel like we've sort of lost that art. I guess it is an art, because not too many people do it anymore, but you keep it alive.
You know, I try to do it. I try to live it in my personal life, my professional life, and everything else. I've got 3, you know, the good Lord blessed me with 3 sons. And then I know he has a sense of humor because I've got 3 granddaughters. I know how to raise sons. You know, you grab them by the shirt collar when they're not listening and get their attention. Little girls you can't do that with. Yeah. But I can remember my oldest granddaughter, who's now at UL. You know, she would come up to me when she could walk and you know, and communicate. And she'd ask me a question. She would say, "Papa," and I'd always say, "Yes, ma'am." And she always gave me this funny look, like, why are you doing? Because I'm instilling at a young age that that's the proper way to respond to people.
Yeah.
And it's important. The little things are so important.
Let's talk about after St. Bernadette. After the nuns got you into shape, did you ever get spanked?
Absolutely.
Okay.
By the nuns or by my parents?
By the nuns.
Absolutely.
Okay. Did you tell your parents, or was it one of those things where the nuns would say, all right, I'm not going to tell your mom and dad this between us, because I've had that happen before. So, or did your mom and dad find out?
Both. There was more than one occasion that they took care of it at school.
You had multiple spankings. You had to be tamed, right?
I don't know about tamed. They just probably reeled in a little bit. The funny thing is I thought, and I tell people this all the time, because to a child, they're so impressionable, and you're putting things, involving things into their life and introducing things that is going to go with them for a lifetime. I thought Sister Mary Edmund at St. Bernadette was 6'3" at 240 pounds.
That was her reputation.
Exactly. And I took a picture of her with her when I graduated 7th grade. What am I, 12 years old at 7th grade? I was not a big kid. I was tall, but I wasn't. Right. And she reached me to my shoulder when I was in 7th grade, and I'm like, would you? And I didn't realize it till later in life. I go back, and my mom did a fantastic job of keeping photo albums for all of us kids and everything, and that picture was in there, and I was like, oh no, she psyched us all out.
Yeah. Well, they had a way of doing that. I mean, my mom worked at St. Francis for 30 years, and I'd walk in, and although they weren't my principals back in the day, the principals that were at the school then, I was scared to go talk to them. I mean, it's that persona that they put out. After St. Bernadette, where were you off to then?
Went to Vanderbilt, and then, as they had a lot of strict rules too, and if you didn't abide by the rules, they asked you not to come back. So I got that invitation, and I went on to H.L. Bourgeois.
Mm-hmm. Vanderbilt had the old hair rule where you couldn't touch your ears, right?
We always had, even in the 70s, we had, although my dad, everybody said he looked like Neil Diamond. He had his long hair at that time, but and we all kind of went through our, the feathered hair with the bangs and a little bit over the collar. But we always stayed in.
Back when we could grow long hair. I mean, the old feather, that was a big deal. I mean,
was the 80s.
You had to have the feathered look going into. When could you tell? What were your interests like in high school? Was it science? Was it math? I know it wasn't French. What was it?
The thing that got me in a lot of trouble growing up, girls.
How was your GPA? Was it one you had to work on, or did it come natural?
No, it didn't. It was not a natural thing. It was something I had to put the time and the work. The Catholic schools set the foundation for loads and loads of homework and books and curriculum and everything like that. But it was, it was still something that, it wasn't just a natural, like other kids, they ace everything and never crack a book.
Yeah, very true. I have a nephew like that. Yeah, if it could only been like that.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. This one-on-one program has been brought to you by the law offices of Waits and Downer.